Hello and welcome to the Cloud Design Box User Adoption Podcast. I'm Darren Hemming, and here with me today is Philippa Wraithmell. Hi, Philippa.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thank you, Darren.
So Philippa is the founder of EdRuption, but we're going to ask you a little bit about yourself in a moment. The purpose of this podcast today is to talk about streamlining your digital ecosystem with the interoperability of Microsoft 365 for education. Yay! So we're going to be looking at topics like pedagogy, strategy and vision, and streamlining success and cost saving. So if you're into those things, then stay tuned. Philippa, welcome. Do you want to tell us, because you've been immersed in digital strategy for quite some time. Can you share a bit about your background and some of the projects you've been involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from the UK originally. I now am out in the United Arab Emirates, where I've done the majority of my digital strategy work for the last 8 years, working with some of the sort of top schools, the most high fee paying schools out here, to be able to build them bespoke digital strategies, which has taught me an awful lot. Throughout my time doing that, obviously you find lots of peaks and troughs and lots of different bits of information, but also led me to write a book about it, because what I was finding was an awful lot of people were reaching out to me about basically all the things that I'd learned along the way, and it seemed more appropriate just to put it all down on a piece of paper. So I wrote a book called The Digital Ecosystem, which is exactly as you've just mentioned, what we call systems that we use within any industry, but in this case, education. And an ecosystem to me is very much about being built on strong foundations, policies, governance, guidance, having safeguards for schools, which is your glass, which is the bit. So I sort of frame it all around a geodesic dome, a bit like the Eden Project.
By the way, I should say that's my favourite shape. I love geodesics.
It's my favourite.
I don't know why I'm obsessed with them. That's not relevant at all. So please carry on. But what a great shape.
Absolutely. I want one in my garden. When I retire, I'm going to make one into like a big kind of dome in the garden with lots of plants in.
I'm looking forward to Mars, right? When people move to Mars and we'll all live under geodesic domes, because it's the most stable shape.
Exactly. And this is my thing about it being such a great analogy for what your digital strategy should be, because it should be really strong. We should be able to take a piece out and put a new piece in when we need to repair it or change it. And that's exactly how we need to look at technology, is the fact that it changes so rapidly. We have to have really strong foundations and vision and understanding throughout everybody to make those connections, to be able to keep them really sturdy, because inside it, there is so many different people trying to thrive and strive and grow and adapt and develop, that we have to keep them all safe, but we have to keep them safe in this really strong environment. So that's exactly it. So the book is all about governance and systems and interoperability, which is one of my favorite words, and how we can make learning tangible and building it into curriculums and building then in innovation. And since writing the book, I've just been in awe of all these different systems that essentially have gone, what's out there, what's happening in education, okay, how can we simplify this? And actually one of the things, exactly as you alluded to a minute ago, is that Microsoft have kind of gone, okay, well, yeah, we could do that, we could build that in, and we could add that, and we could have that, and then actually we've got one system that talks to itself really cleverly in a way that can help save time and money and everything. And so wrote the book, and then went to work for the government out here, and very proudly have written a digital governance policy, which is now part and parcel of the education system out here for Abu Dhabi. It's being launched this year to schools, so they've got some time to kind of get their heads around it. But because one of the things that I find in education is that there is so many things that happen and so many new things and so much coming on the market that people get really confused and they get really lost. And actually, the thing that's really missing is actually the strategy, because in school we have strategies for everything except digital, because why on earth would we, even though it's part and parcel of everything that we do in every aspect of operational academics or any of it. So, I think it's just one of the most important parts. Digital fluency is what I like to call it, because we get to a point of fluency where we don't realize we're doing it. Like most of us will now pick up our phones and send an email and be on a phone call and take a photograph and store things, write a document, airdrop it, whatever it happens to be. And they don't think of it. I don't sit there and think, oh, I'm in an IT lesson right now. This is just like when I was at school. You just think, this is life. I've, written a shopping list and WhatsApped it to my friend, or, whatever it happens to be. We can't see that. And one of the only places that I see within industries that doesn't see it in that way, of it being infused, is actually education. And that's where we just need to be making that shake up. And I guess over the last 8 years, so I launched EdRuption this year at BET, and it was my final kind of, there's just so much more to do, and there's so many more people that need to be helped. And it really is about empowering change across the board, and not just for those schools that have everything, but actually for everybody. Because you might have one computer in your school, you might have 7,000 computers, it doesn't matter. You need a digital strategy, because we need to build digital fluency into not only our children, but actually our adults. And so there's kind of two prongs to it, really. I also do a project called Digital Bridge, which is literally, and I could 100% count myself in this as well, we are a gap of knowledge where we didn't grow up with it, and we're building these elements that we need to now understand. And how do we do that when we're the first people doing it, and how do we do it, not in the right way, in a way where we can kind of keep iterating and start to change that. So yeah, it's a big project.
Fantastic. So that's a very powerful concept. Just some definitions here, because people talk about, we got a strategy, and here's the vision or the mission statement or whatever it might be, ethos. But in your language, when you're talking about strategy, can you just define for me what do you call a strategy, and how does that relate to vision, and what's the difference? And in practical terms, what will that look like for a school or for a multi-academy trust?
So my first start is, what is the school's vision? Because the biggest thing that I feel that is an error is the fact that schools go, and digital technology, and they just add it as a line, and you kind of go, hang on a minute, actually that's not what we should be doing, because again, we're adding it on. It's like a sidecar to what we're doing. So one of the first things I do is I speak to all the stakeholders and sort of say, okay, well, what is your vision? Like, how do you want this to look? And everyone will come up with all these amazing ideas of things they want to see, and it's going to take time, but ultimately it comes down to, what are the demographics in your school? What is the area like that you're serving? Who are those people, and who are your teachers? Then also things like, what is your budget? Because that's really important, because it needs to be sustainable. And so then you start to look, okay, at your vision. Well, for instance, if your demographic is highly bi and multi-language learners, you need to have devices that are going to be able to support that specific need. If you have a high proportion of students with special educational needs, and a specific one, we also need to make sure that we're identifying softwares and platforms and devices that can support that. And by that, I don't mean let's have 17 different things, because their cognitive load is then going to be absolutely thrashed. But actually, we start to look at it as, what is the best system long term for us to be able to use and build upon? And that's where, for me, it really comes back to saying, pare down. So I go into many schools and just go, you don't need that, you don't need that, you don't need that. When was the last time you looked at what your system provides you with? And that's where things like the interoperability of somewhere like Microsoft comes in so heavily, because since COVID, and since a vast development of artificial intelligence and many other things that have been going on for absolutely decades, as opposed to just since 2022, we're using systems in a way that is fluent. So I frequently open my Microsoft Teams, and it will say to me, do you want to create a workflow for that? Yeah, actually, I do. I've obviously done it more than once, and you're telling me to do something that will help. Brilliant. That's what I need. Creating a planner and being able to ping it out to everybody within my working environment. Amazing. These are the sorts of things that schools pay thousands to have as an additional product that then doesn't speak to the products they use. And I just think, now that we can, you've got the opportunity to save money, save time, and keep things safely within a digital system where your data is going to be secure. To me, it's just a no-brainer to kind of go back in and look at what we can get rid of and how we can do that. And that aligning with your vision and strategy straight away for everyone else in your school, you've got buy-in. You're saying to them, I'm going to save you time. I'm going to give you a reason why this is more effective, and I'm going to make it easier for you. Because instead of attending 17 different training sessions in your inset week, You're actually just going to attend one. And then we're going to look at it from a curriculum element, and we're going to show you how you fit them all in. But we're not going to be talking about tech. We're going to be talking about learning. And so then you're talking in front of educators about something they understand, something they can get on board with. So for me, that's kind of how I begin a strategy. I mean, there's lots of obviously parts and parcels to that in terms of timelines of training and different streams of training and senior teams of training and, you know, different styles of leadership training, and even lots of people who will be far, far ahead, and people who will still be sitting there thinking, if I just stay really quiet, no one will know that I don't know what they're talking about. And we still have that, and that, you know, that's okay, but let's bring them up.
Great. So many tasks in schools can be labor intensive or costly to do. What strategies would you recommend for enhancing efficiency and reducing expenses on some of those things? We've already talked about minimizing the number of apps that you have, and, you know, maybe just use things like Microsoft 365 and maybe the MIS or SIS, because those tend to do a lot of things. But are there any other specific things that you'd look at?
So I think it's things that talk to your systems. So if you are going to, because obviously what we're looking at in terms of 365 is something that's we have to create it, and that's fine. We actually, as teachers, we quite like that. And that's great. So we're building that, but actually we do know there is content, there's knowledge, and there's information that we need to also give to our students. And so I think the big thing for me there is that if something is taking information in, automated, and is maybe grading or is giving people feedback or is giving information, the majority of systems now will talk back to those systems in some way. And being able to automate that process is a game changer for teachers, because ultimately, if you don't have a system that can integrate, you know, via API or whether it's just that some poor person has to download every so often, upload it, what you end up getting is some teachers who be very diligent and they'll do that on their own, and you'll get other teachers who won't have the time to be able to do that, and so don't. And ultimately what you get then is the creation of a really disparative kind of understanding of where students are. And then really, what's the impact of that platform? Because for some people, it'll be the teacher never logs on, they just go on there and it's students that go on it. So do we really understand that student and their personalization and their learning that they need? Are we looking at skills gaps and monitoring them? Or are we actually, and then the other side of it is that teachers are going in and they are identifying gaps. So then you get some classes of students who are excelling and bridging gaps and filling in different content knowledge from curriculums and having that extended in person in the classroom, and others who are just kind of ad hoc winging it because they're not really looking at the data and not really understanding it. So I think having any system that can talk back is something vital, and it's something I talk to ed tech companies about all the time. Is there's only a certain amount of companies that you need to do that with. Ultimately, if you can link up with Microsoft, amazing. If you can do it with Google, brilliant. You know, if you can have these links with things like iSAMS or Arbor or anywhere like that, it's going to pull that data. Because the other thing you get from that as well is that cross-pollination of, okay, so I've got a child who is not attending X amount, and I've got their grades here, and those massive systems, especially the MIS systems, can automatically go, there's a correlation here, I can ping that up, it can be a data thing, we can create a data lake, we can start to hyper-personalize different student learning paths and have that information at our fingertips. And I mean, ultimately that also goes back, as you mentioned earlier, literacy, data literacy for staff. Because if they don't understand data, that's beyond concept. And I will say, and quite openly, when I was a middle leader, was the first time anyone ever spoke to me about what data really meant. And that, you know, is 2 or 3 years after I started teaching. It's not talked about enough to be normalized. And I think there's so much potential in what can be created now from these systems. And actually having that interoperability makes it simple. It brings it up, it brings it in a mark book in your team's environment where you can go, yeah, actually, Darren isn't doing great there, and I can see that.
That was often the case. So, what I mean, and that's quite easy to do with Microsoft. And obviously, what we do is we start off in the MIS and the SIS, and we take that and we use that to create class teams, and then in those class teams, teachers will create assignments. They might use AI to create those assignments. Why not? and then those grade books, mark books exist, and they sit inside teams. And there are ways now to start writing that back. Different MISs have different approaches. Some of them kind of try and pull it automatically. Some of them, it's more in the hands of the teachers, and the teachers go and get that set of marks from the team's assignments, and they shuffle it across into mark. But it's still, you're not typing it in again. You're not sat there going, can you read these out to me and I'll put them in. It's not that. It's
going at least down your mark book.
Oh, don't. It's bringing back memories. It's at least semi-automated, isn't it? So, and there's different ways of doing that as well. And that's just one example. And then you talked about some of the, I'm going to use the word deliberately, some of the insights that you get with the Microsoft stack. So assignments is part of it, but also things like Reflect, where you can actually reflect on how happy the students are.
Fantastic, especially during the early years where it doesn't even have to be digital, because so many, and I totally get it, they're like, we don't want to have devices in our classrooms because they're so little. Fine, you can just ping it across a wall and see what's happening, and like import that data immediately without having to do that. That is incredible. But also to be able to push out information, you can kind of see, oh, you know what, year 9 they're not having a great day. Let's see if we can just send them out something and actually get some insights into maybe what that's about. And actually, so straight away, their well-being is being monitored in a more effective way. And again, aligning that with other elements that might be going on, straight away, you have a bigger picture of what's happening in those children's lives. And that's one system. We're not learning multiple systems. And you can very easily go, well, actually, I know how to use Microsoft in terms of Word and PowerPoint and Excel. Great. Okay, I've got my base. I know how to log into my Teams calls, and I understand how to use my classroom. So straight away, your stress on a teacher, you're saying, well, actually, all I want you to understand is how to use insights right now. And we're going to spend the first term looking at how does this work effectively in your environment, and then start to give little sort of drops of, okay, well, this week we're going to do this, and next week we're going to try and add that. Okay, well, what does that all look like together? And so we very simply, without over stressing somebody, remove things that they were spending hours doing. I mean, when you were talking about mark books, I remember going into a school and finding that every department to put their mark books into different spreadsheets in different ways with different calibration tools. And it was just mad. But if we can start to build governance into that as well, of the reason we do it this way is because it's simpler. The reason we do it this way is because it's easier. It saves you time. People will start to get on board with those things. And I think one of the other things that you were saying about the insights, the emails, I get a little ping saying, have you responded to such and such? And you said you were going to book this meeting. Did you do that? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I had forgotten. Those little things are, I mean, not only time savers, but also when you are so busy, that's incredible to be able to just know at the touch of a button you've got an assistant basically saying to you, you've not done that yet, get on with it, in a really nice way.
Teachers have I think it's one of the hardest jobs, and compared to kind of working in industry, I've worked in kitchens and things, that's hard as well because it's sweaty, but actually the number of different plates that you have to keep spinning. Absolutely. As a teacher, you might be a form tutor, then you go off, you got year 9, you've got a mark ready for year 10 lesson, year 11 tomorrow, then you've got parents evening meetings, and you've got to prepare for all of this. I think it's crazy the number of interactions that any teacher has in the day. Absolutely. It's thousands. Yeah. You don't get that working in an office. You just don't.
No, absolutely. I mean, you are exhausted when you get back. I know I've spoken to people, they're like, oh, but you've just been teaching all day. Like, have that many people ask you a question all at once and you will get overloaded. It is exhausting. I was on a project last week where we were doing a big event. It was all about wellbeing and digital technology and learning. We were creating apps. And the two people with me, they actually were like, this is like draining. I was like, yeah, because they don't stop. They won't stop asking questions and they always want to know. And they'll ask the same question 17 times in different ways. And you're having to pick out where maybe the information went wrong, or how can you reteach that in a way that they're going to understand? Or are they really on task? Are they doing that? Have they grasped that? What, have they used that properly? And all of those different things. As well as thinking, I've also got to grade these students. I've also got to give them a report. I've also got to look at them pastorally. And it's a lot. It's a big weight. And I think there's a lot on the mental load on the teacher that the thing I feel that technology does so well now, and it has been clunky in the past, and it has been difficult, and there has been too many systems to deal with. But we are in an age where you can have one system in a school and it can do everything, and it can also save you money. Because I always think, especially with something like Microsoft, you're paying for educational licenses for email accounts because everybody uses email. So automatically you have a suite of tools at your fingertips that you can use every day to make your life easier, and not even have to think about all these other things that you're paying for, because you don't need to pay for them anymore, and save a fortune.
Yeah, and exactly the same things are happening in business and in industry. You're cutting down the number of different tools, and you're funneling that into maybe email, maybe Teams, and SharePoint, and a few other places like that. And you're cutting out all the extraneous noise and just getting to the heart and just doing your job without any fuss. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. One of the really exciting things that I saw, I was talking to somebody a few months ago when I was researching some AI for a white paper that I'm doing. And they were talking to me about how they spent the whole year looking at AI and ethics and guardrails with a whole community, the operations team, the academics team, but also parents and students. Fantastic project. And at the end of it, he's made a chatbot. He's made an internal chatbot where he's put, because the policy they've created is 42 pages. And like every policy, we're all going, I'm not reading that, that's absolutely massive. But pop it into a chatbot, which we now can create ourselves. And I can ask it, I can say, where do I stand with, this in terms of ages of students being able to use this platform? Ping, straight away, there's my information. And so straight away, again, we're using the time someone's put into putting those policies in place. We're actually reading them, we're actually understanding them, and we're going to take that in a lot more because it's much more relevant to us in that point of time, but in a really innovative way that's very specific to our own environment. And I just think that's incredible.
Yeah. I write loads of policies for the company, and I know some people sometimes read them, but generally there's a lot, and some of them are quite long-winded. So the idea that you can say to people, you don't necessarily have to read everything. Just go to this bot, Copilot in Microsoft language.
Exactly.
And years ago, you would have thought, I need a developer for that. We need to get some developer. We need a data developer, and then an analyst and some other people.
And it would take years.
And now just normal people pretty much can go and they can use Copilot Studio, and it's basically a wizard. You can plug it all in. You point it to these documents, and
off it goes.
It just does it for you. I mean, just how amazing is it? We are living in the future. We really are.
Absolutely. I literally was talking at a conference as a keynote, and I referenced Tomorrow's World. So I was a big fan of Tomorrow's World, aside from the fact that one of the presenters was called Philippa, because that to me was like, there's another Philippa in the world. And I didn't think that at the time, I felt like I was the only person called Philippa, and why had I got such an unusual name? And it was always, I remember asking, why is it called Tomorrow? And it was like, because it's never really going to happen. It's just all going to be tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. And I was like, that's a bit disappointing, really. But actually now we live in tomorrow's world. We can't now say, do that tomorrow. You can't wait until tomorrow. We have to do things today because they're here, they're now. We can't put our head in the sand, whether we're doing it at a low level or a high level. We could be innovators and forward thinking and great, or we could just be getting on day to day, but we cannot ignore it. It's there.
And the rate of change has accelerated as well. So back in the 70s and the 80s, you were like, it'd be like 20, 30 years. We're not going to have the flying cars anytime soon. And that just sounds like science fiction. Yeah. Whereas now it's almost as if somebody has an idea, and because the AI and similar systems help you evolve that idea so much more quickly, you're actually getting there before you're ready as a society for it. Yeah. So we've got to be ready, we've got to be fast, we've got to be responsive.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think schools, absolutely. Schools that haven't yet got a digital strategy are really far behind. And that is an awful lot of them. I think anyone who's listening to this who thinks, well, I haven't got one, am I the only one? No, not at all. But it's not something that can wait till tomorrow. It is something that has to happen now, because you cannot have a school system teaching the children of the future something that's not relevant to them and not based upon relevancy. It just baffles me. There are skills that we need to teach children, and I mean, Microsoft itself has their transformation framework. It's there in literally, if you just wanted to take something off the shelf and go, I'm a Microsoft Institute, here I go, you can literally
very,
go through
very
it.
pretty too, isn't it? With the different colours. They've done a lovely job on that.
It's very nice. I do like it.
It's very accessible. Yes, yeah. We're involved in the digital acceleration programs and things like that. And seeing schools and multi-academy trusts going into there and then seeing come out of that process.
Yeah.
And they've started to be transformed. It's a long-term process.
It is, yeah.
But you see the change quite quickly.
It doesn't stop. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes people think, well, if I just do that and then in 12 months it'll be fine. And you kind of go, well, yeah, in 12 months you'll be ready for the next thing. And it's like always that kind of hill of you. Every job you have is slightly harder than the last, but you don't realise how hard it is. So even like you think your GCSEs are hard, but then you do your A-levels, then you do a university degree. And actually it always seems easier because you've been prepared for what you have before. Unfortunately, what schools have done is they've gone, I haven't done anything and now I've got to get to here. And that is a huge leap. And so we just need to allow as well schools to kind of go at their own pace and sort of say, as long as you've got a strategy, you will get there, but you have to start it. Otherwise you'll never get there. And that gap's just going to grow. And, you know, we could get AI to write our strategy for us, but will it be relevant to what we're doing, and will it be accurate, and will it support our needs? I think it's really a human approach in a school. I think it needs to be done by people who know those students, who understand those needs and understand the demographics of the region. So yeah, I mean, obviously it can help to write some of those policies, but yeah, so it's really interesting place to be. But I think I think if people haven't started, they need to jump on now.
Yeah, it's like I always say to my son when he's got homework to do, don't rush, but start now.
Yeah, exactly. Start while it's still in your head, because then it's a lot easier as you continue to progress. And what happens normally as well is that as the time goes on, because we've started it, our brain processes, and the more we process it, the more we think about it, and ultimately the better the work will be.